So welcome everybody. Welcome to this evening's masterclass on how to stop being a people pleaser. I'm Lucht. I'm a transformation coach, and I am here dedicated to creating awareness around our destructive patterns and finding opportunities to create new choices, new freedom, and places and spaces where we can expand. My main aim here is to create clarity. And when we have clarity, we can create new choices and create new outcomes. Ultimately, all of this is about creating a healthy or a healthier relationship with ourselves. Yeah. And that is what I'm here to do. And part of creating a healthy relationship to ourselves is, especially with this specific topic, is to find ways to untangle ourselves from places that feel that are destructive or cause us emotional or mental pain. So tonight's masterclass is really about bringing awareness to this mechanism, to this pattern. Sometimes we call it a wound, but the wound is only really how we relate to this topic. It's not something that we can't overcome with time and practice. It is a relationship or a way that we relate to ourselves, which is able to change and to, it's very malleable, but I'll come on to more about that in a minute. I've got some notes. I want to make sure that I am thorough. So I will be looking at them and sharing from those. So if you see me look down, that is what I'm doing. Can you tell me what your definition of a people pleaser is? I'll just give you some time to type in the chat. So the comment is making somebody else feel happy, even if it's at my own detriment. Yep, absolutely. Any other comments? Making sure everybody is satisfied all of the time. Yes. Can you feel the pressure at that sentence? Good grief. Whoa, I'm already feeling anxious just thinking about that sentence. I don't know if you feel like that too as you're writing it, like, whoa, that's a lot of responsibility right there. Okay. How does people pleasing show up for you in your life, in your experience? Putting my own needs aside. Yes, absolutely. I seem to be practicing it every day, particularly in relation to my daughter, where I find I don't hold her accountable when I should, to keep her happy. Accountability. Oh my goodness, that's a massive one. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So we're going to come into what the definition of a people pleaser is in more detail and how it can show up. But just to give you some context, what I'm going to do is divide this masterclass into 3 sections. The first, and the reason I do that is because to create long-lasting and sustainable change, we create in 3 different ways. We do, the first step is creating awareness. By creating awareness of our patterns, then that gives us a choice, which is a choice to make new behaviors, new thoughts, new experiences. And then the third part is reinforcement. I wish there didn't have to be a reinforcement. I wish we could just go, oh, I know that now, and that's it, done, forever, all good, but it doesn't work like that. So we fit it into 3 sections, and that's how I'm going to outline tonight's masterclass. Okay, please ask questions as we go along. If something comes to you, anything that you want to ask, just put it in the chat box and I will answer it as we go along. Okay, so we are not born with these distorted thoughts. We are not born with these distorted patterns. It is programming at its core. A lot of this stuff, I'm going to assume for one moment we're going to take away the life themes that we're here incarnated to learn in a spiritual sense, right? I'm just going to put that to one side for a minute because that does play into this, but I'm not going to specifically speak to that this evening. So we're not born with these distorted patterns. These are things that we learn. We learn as we're going along, as we grow, as we develop, as we mirror or react with our initial caregivers. And most of the time, for those of us who are people pleasers, we have a predisposition to being very kind, very empathetic, very intuitive, although these are all things that as children we have no idea what any of this means. We just presume everybody's like it, right? And many of us can feel energy, like, you know, before somebody else comes into a room how they're feeling, especially if they're energetically very loud. Do you know, do you remember, do you know somebody who's energetically very loud? Sometimes I used to come home and before I'd even put the key in the lock, when I was living with my ex-husband, who was a very destructive man, before I put the key in the lock, I could feel the energy in the house. I could feel what kind of mood he was in. And I had no idea that that was a way of relating to the world, a way of being and holding myself. I just presumed that everyone was like that. And for those of us who are sensitive to energy, to feelings, to emotions, it can be really difficult growing up without a toolkit, a guidance, somebody to go, hey, you're made like this. Let's give you some tools in order to be able to help yourself navigate the world as a sensitive being. We're not taught that. So we are now learning this retrospectively, most of the time because we've got to a point where it's too painful to stay as we are. We recognize that there are places where we want to show ourselves more love. Maybe we can see there's some wonky patterns that are showing up. And if I may be so blunt, I have often got to the point where I am so sick of my own bullshit that I think, right, I need to change something now. Something needs to shift. And that's the point where alchemy happens. That's the point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready now. I'm ready to sort this out. I'm ready to have a look at this and see what's behind the pattern and what's going on. Does that resonate? Have you ever got to that stage? You're like, I've had enough. Also, your mum was like that in terms of that big energy, right? Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of highly sensitive people or empaths or people who sense energy in that way, who are very drawn to that kind of personality too. Like, I was married to somebody like that, and you could say it's the complete contrast of our experience. I like to think so that we can learn to untangle ourselves in a very obvious way, although it doesn't always seem as clear and as straightforward as that. The last thing I want to say about this specifically is our brains are malleable. We are programmable beings. And I want that to be a ray of light as you go through this masterclass. And if you take any of my workshops and any of my courses, I want you to understand that there is such a beautiful ray of light within all of this, which is of possibility. the possibility of expansion, the possibility of releasing, the possibility of growth, because at a scientific fundamental level, our brains are malleable, programmable. We can create new thoughts, new patterns, new connections with repetition. That's point 3 that we'll come back to. And, you know, I love to weave in the hyper spiritual in this kind of realm. And I want to bring to this conversation the fact that at our core, the soul wants to expand also. So we've got these 2 really beautiful forces in our favor. We just have to learn the language of how to harness them in our favor. Does that make sense? Do you see what I mean? Yeah, awesome. So when I was thinking this evening, when I was creating this class, and I was thinking about, so how does a people pleaser show up? I wrote a whole A4 side piece of paper, no word of a lie. And as I'm writing it down, I'm thinking, oh, God, I've done every single one of these myself, every single one, sometimes more in that direction, sometimes in that direction. So I'm going to read them out to you, and I want you to understand that you don't have to be all of them to be a people pleaser. And the idea isn't to create shame or discomfort or a feeling of you're made wrongly or that there's something wrong with you. This is literally just about creating awareness. And with awareness, we can create love, compassion, and kindness for ourselves. I like the idea of any time that I have a pattern that comes up in my awareness, I like to put my hand on my heart and say to myself, you poor sweetheart, that's really hardcore what you've been experiencing and thinking about. And I try to show myself compassion, which isn't always my first reaction to things. My inner critic is loud and can be very loud. So when I find a moment to say, you poor sweetheart to myself, that's a turning moment. That is a really sweet spot. Just going to wait to see if anybody writes. I can see there's some people writing stuff. Okay. I did that when I read my first human design report. Totally changed my feelings towards myself. Oh my goodness, that's so true. So for those of you who aren't familiar with human design, it's basically a tool to better understand ourselves. And I'm sure there's a more eloquent way of describing that, what human design is, but it gives a language for us to be able to find acceptance and validation for how we are made, rather than thinking there's something wrong with us, which I think is very, very empowering, especially when you're dealing with children. But that's a whole different topic we can come on to another day. So what can it look like? I'm going to read you some things, see how many you can relate to. So chameleon was a word that came up for me. I can be a chameleon. I can morph myself and mold myself into whatever situation or person. And that, you know, I mean, that can be a benefit in many ways. But at the expense of your own identity is the key here. Often feeling like you're resentful of either, at the core of resentment is you resent yourself for not standing up for yourself, for not being there for yourself, for not speaking up, for not standing up. You know, it's very curious, and we think it's a resentment of another person, but actually it's more of a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. Feeling undervalued, a fuzzy sense of identity. We outsource decisions often. What do you think is an often a really very common phrase. Tell me what you think. Oh, I really want to talk to you about this. Can you give me your opinion? All of the time. Like, it's not a bad thing to have that conversation, but when it's your predominant go-to reaction to find out what to do next, then it can become distorted. You're seeking external validation. hates or avoids conflict, struggle to stand up for yourself or speak up. I wrote poor time management, and that can be saying yes too much and taking on too much. But poor time management also means, for those of us who are very good at time management, means taking on so much that you are at your limit nearly every single day, doing every single thing. And people go, she's really efficient. She's so good at everything. And more, you just get more and more and more and more. And you can't say no. So you're struggling, and then you're overwhelmed. And it's all a very messy experience. Comment is me, exclamation mark. Doesn't want to rock the boat. Feels guilty often, feeling on edge, feels selfish, thinking about themselves. Excessively kind without discernment. This is a controversial thing that I'm about to say, so take what resonates and leave the rest. But I've often thought of myself when dealing with certain people that I have stupid discernment, stupid compassion. So I'm just like compassionate with everybody, even with the people who not necessarily treat me very well. And so it creates this very distorted relationship. And I know stupid sounds like a really harsh word, and I don't mean it in that harsh way. I just want to create a real clarity that there's an important moment where you have to discern who you're kind to. It doesn't have to be for everybody. I would also go as far as to say, for those of you who resonate with being kind, kindness is a superpower. And I want you to learn and practice that your kindness gets given with discretion. And you can give it to whoever you want, but you do it because you really want to and not because you feel you have to. Kindness is transformative. It can really change people's lives. Yeah. But not everybody wants to receive that. And not everyone actually wants to interact with kindness and is able to receive kindness. And then it kind of becomes this vampiric energy drain that you're giving kindness into a black hole of doom, and there's just a sucking. Does that make sense? Can you relate to that? So that's what I call stupid compassion. Because we don't recognize just how important kindness is and how it's a gift. That's my point, really. We get walked all over, or allow ourselves to be walked all over. We're not comfortable with receiving. Oh my goodness. How many times have you gone, oh no, I couldn't possibly, or somebody wants to buy you a coffee and you're like, no, let me pay. And they're like, oh, come on, I really want to do this. No, I couldn't possibly, let me. And then you're in this. Have you ever been out two people pleasers for coffee? That's hilarious. Who's going to pay? It's just so funny. I'll pay. No, I'll pay. No, I'll pay. No, I'll pay. And they're both like, oh my God, this is painful. Someone slapped my wrist once when I would not let her pay and said, I'll pay. Yeah, exactly that. You can get quite aggressive at the coffee shop. I'm making light of it, but it's got quite a serious undertone. When we don't receive, we are cutting off one of the most fundamentally important energies in the universe. If you're thinking about giving and receiving, yin yang, that kind of flow that happens in the way that we're made and created, there is a give and receive. there is that energy. And if you're cutting off one of them, it goes for everything. That goes for money, that goes for love, that goes for kindness, that goes for synchronicities. It goes, you're basically saying no to life, no to the good stuff, no to joy. No, I cannot interact with the world in this way. Oh, this is a good one. You hate disappointing people. Oh my goodness, I've got a little story to tell you about that later. And then maybe you have a list of a whole ton of obligations. I shoulds. That's a cracker. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. They want me to do this. I should have to do that. Hands up if you've got a list of shoulds. Hands up with your lists of shoulds, whether you always feel satisfied and happy and thrilled to be completing your list of should. Oh, nobody. Interesting. So how many of those did you relate to or resonate with? So many. Mm-hmm. So the aim and the point of this masterclass isn't for you to go away this evening going, all right, I am now going to stop being a people pleaser completely, and I'm going to address every single one of those all in one go, because frankly, that's actually not possible. It's not feasible, and your nervous system would explode. So we're going to very gently think about picking one of these to rumble with. All right, and you don't have to pick now. We're going to go through the rest of the class, and then you can see which one. Ultimately, you'll find that there is one of these behaviors that annoys you the most or causes you the most pain, like you're not standing up for yourself, or you're not asking for what you need, or you don't know what you want, or you're taking on too much. Whatever feels like the most constrictive and the most pressing, start with that one. So the story I was going to share with you was, and it's a story that actually happened today. Over a couple of weeks ago, I went on this really, really gorgeous date with my man, and we went into London, and my friend lent me her beautiful coat, and it was the coat that she wore. You know already this isn't going to end well, this story. And she lent me her coat that she got married in. It was this fluffy coat, and I felt so glamorous in it, and it was lovely, and it was, and throughout the course of the time that I had this coat, the lining started to split. And this, I mean, bearing in mind, this was the coat she got married in. She is attached. This is the story I'm telling myself. Not only is she attached to this, but she gave this coat to me to caretake, to look after, to nourish, to, this was part of her history, and I'm creating a bigger story, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to absolutely not end well. This could totally end our friendship. Like, she might absolutely say, no, that's it, I can't believe you didn't look after my coat, my most prized possession, this is absolutely not all right. And I have created this story in my mind, and I am now panicked at the thought of talking to her and sharing my mistake. I not only am I panicked, but I am stressed out thinking about how she's going to react, and the conflict that, and I really don't want her to think badly of me either. That's the other thing, right? But I know from previous experience that ignoring this situation only does two things. One, it makes my anxiety worse because I feel like I'm hiding something, and it creates a wedge between our friendship. You know, every time I'll see her, I'll be thinking, I have a secret you don't know about, that I've been really bad, and I don't want to share it with you because I'm frightened that it's gonna, you know, so this story grows. And I also know that going into this conversation isn't going to kill me. How many times have you thought, that cannot rumble with the intensity of the emotion that I feel about this, because I actually, part of me feels like I might be annihilated on some level. The intensity of the emotion that comes up, you're like, I just don't know what to do with that. That's just too much feelings, too many feelings. Have you ever had that kind of experience? So it takes a lot of courage to break these patterns. And the story that we tell ourselves is never, unless you're with a very narcissistic person or somebody who is emotionally unsafe, it's never ever as bad as we imagine it's going to be. So I had this conversation with my friend, and her reaction was she laughed at me. She laughed at me in the most joyful, fun, loving way, and was like, and because she has excellent boundaries, and she said to me, I never would have lent you something if I was worried about what was going to happen to it. Can you imagine a people pleaser, the resentment, if they'd lent you something that they really didn't want to lend you, and then this had happened? That's where our conditioning comes from, having had these experiences over and over with people who do things that they don't want to do, and then something happens and it creates mass conflict, which feels unsafe. But what I now have are friendships who can own their own emotions. They understand what a healthy boundary is. They say yes when they mean yes. They say no when they mean no. So when I entered into this relationship with her and had this experience, it wasn't a thing. In fact, like I said, she just laughed at me and was just like, it's no thing. It really is no thing. And I was like, the amount of healing that happened from my pattern in that moment was incredible. And not only that, my relationship to myself strengthened because I owned the story. I rumbled with the conflict. I said the difficult thing and did the difficult thing. And then my relationship with my friend has got stronger, because not only do I trust me more, I trust her more, but now we've had a moment together where she saw my integrity and I felt her safe emotional response to this situation. And so there's only been a win-win that's come out of this coat, you know, because of all these other, because of all these other things that we put in place. Now, yes, a coat isn't a massive deal in the grand scheme of things. But the story I told myself about that was enormous. Can you relate to that? And many of the times, the behaviors and the reactions that we have are on autopilot. And it's only until we have a situation like this with the coat that you suddenly think, oh no, there's something wonky going on here. Because when you're having a relationship with somebody that is loving and safe, then you bring loving and safe energy to the conversation. It's never like you imagine it to be. It's always an opportunity for growth and transformation, always. Do you have to rumble with some discomfort? Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. Do you have to put your big girl pants on? Yes. Do you have to dig deep, find courage, breathe deeply, and just maybe call somebody first and go, oh my God, and they're like, it's fine, you've got this, it's okay. How many times have you done that? Yeah, exactly. And if you haven't done that, find somebody you can do that with, because you need somebody on your side, somebody who can see your pattern. Maybe they have the same pattern, but you're both working towards creating healthy relationships with yourself. So where does the people pleaser pattern come from? Any ideas? For me, it feels like childhood trauma, where I tried to make everything better. Childhood. Yeah. 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 So they're basically coping mechanisms. This is a coping mechanism from our childhood. And a lot of you watching this, you will be aware that when I share stuff about childhood, it's not a blaming, it's not a judgment. I'm not allocating blame to somebody like it's your fault, you need to take responsibility for this. It's not that. It's just about creating awareness to understand what's happened. You could quite easily just be compassionate with yourself. I say easily, it takes practice, but you can sit with compassion for yourself and not need to know where it comes from. But I find it's useful, especially because I am passionate about breaking ancestral patterns and not passing this stuff on to my children, to be able to understand where this pattern or this mechanism comes from. So there will have been somebody in your family or with your family of origin that required extra attention, whether it was a stress thing, whether it was a sickness thing, whether they were massive martyrs, whether they were narcissists. It doesn't really matter what. It was just an imbalance of attention within the family that was focused on somebody else. And the message that you took away from that and internalized was, there's no space for me here. And in order for me to keep safe, in order for me to find safety within this, I am going to run the filter of whatever's going on through my own to make sure that I adapt, mold, change, and not add to this situation. So often, many of us will have learnt to stay small, not ask for what we want or need. For those of us who have really big emotional inner worlds, there was no space for somebody to explain to us how to navigate that, how to work with that. So all we learned was, I've got massive emotions, but this person's need, for whatever reason, is more than mine is. So it's a protective mode. Okay. And what we know about protective modes is that they worked for a specific time, for a specific reason. And as long as you haven't then married somebody like the person in your family of origin, which is often what happens, that threat is no longer the same. It's no longer valid. So we now have the opportunity to recognize, you know what, I am safe now, and I can have a look at this pattern and release it. What we were ultimately doing is a really interesting form of manipulation. We are trying to control people so that we avoid eruptions or disruption or pain or anything that feels like a big emotion, because already we have our inner world that we don't know what to do with, and somebody else's external world is way more important than us, so we try to not add it. Our overall goal is harmony and connection and intimacy, but it's just very wonky. There's a deep core within people pleasers who know that heart-based relationships are based on loving kindness and connection. And yet it's just been distorted enormously. And so we still have the opportunity to create that kind of relationship with those who we choose to have that relationship with now. But there are things sometimes that still get in the way. And this pattern is sneaky, right? Because it's a safety protective mechanism. Does that feel true? So true. Ultimately, what we learn to do, or what we don't learn to do, is self-source. We don't learn our own inner world. We don't learn what we want, what we like, how we are, how we show up. We don't learn how to interact with our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings. And many people pleasers then become practitioners who want to help other people. Okay, because there's part of us that knows that this pain is so much that we want to spread healing and the opportunity to create ease in other people also. The aim really is to create connection to yourself. Learn how to foster and create that connection to your inner world. And then advocate for yourself. Honor yourself. Learn to trust that you have your own back. Respond to what you need or what you want. And then make new choices. You know, there's let's say you want to go for a new job, a job that you know is going to delight you, or at least you feel like it could delight you, but you don't want to go for this new job because you know you're going to need to have a difficult conversation with your boss. And this one difficult conversation potentially is what's stopping you between you and having this new job. But being unable, or feeling like you're unable to rumble with the discomfort of these feelings, means that it stops you from achieving or asking for what you want. What do you think happens then? Nothing. Yeah. Feel resentment. Yes. And a bit of shame. Yes. And the universe works with either expanding or contracting. There's never really a stasis. And we're either constantly choosing things that go towards what we want, or we contract. And it's almost, without trying to sound dramatic about this, it's like a little piece of us dies. And that's where the resentment comes in, because we want to feel joy. Joy is an expansive feeling. Love is an expansive feeling. You can feel it radiating outwards. Resentment is like an inward folding in on yourself, and almost like something, you know, like old cars when they go to the crusher. It's a bit like that. So imagine how many old crushed cars you've got inside of you. But the good thing about the crusher is it's reversible, because we can do whatever we want in our own experience. So we want to be making new choices that break these patterns, that create new patterns. So how can we do that? We can say maybe instead of yes. You can say, I just need some time to think about that. And then give yourself the time to check in with yourself. I'm somebody who doesn't always feel able to make the decision right there and then, because I'm still feeling into what the other person wants. So I kind of have to take myself out of the situation to be able to hear myself before I can go back and say, okay, this is actually what I want. And we're allowed to give ourselves permission to do that, to take time, to allow the answer to come forth, rather than feeling like we have to be immediate with everything. Because if you've said yes to something like baking 600 muffins and by Saturday, and Saturday's tomorrow, and you've said yes, and you really wish you'd said no, you're kind of stuck, aren't you? Unless you can bake 600 muffins in a couple of hours, I don't know. Some of you are highly talented. But that would stress me out big time. Create healthy boundaries. And if you don't know what that means, I have courses on it. Start creating awareness around what it means to have a healthy boundary. I am not going to say to you, oh, poor you for not having healthy boundaries. I will say, oh, you know what? I get it. But equally now you have the opportunity to create something different. And that's empowering. I'm about creating opportunities for empowerment rather than joining you in your misery. We can start creating open communication. I've got a course on that too. Because conscious communication means that we are listening to ourselves and listening to the other. Both of those things are what it takes to create healthy relationships with our loved ones. And something that I've been practicing recently is expressing my needs or my desires or my wants. And I start by saying, I would love to, so I would love to do this. I would love for this to happen. And then I say, would you like that too? So it's not saying, I have to have this happen, because none of us want to go into that space. But it's, you know what it's like when somebody says to you, I would really love to spend time with you. You're like, oh, mostly, oh yeah, that feels lovely. And then they say, would you? You're like, oh my God, an invitation, that feels really lovely. So what you then know is two things. One, that they're delighted about whatever that is that they've just shared with you, and two, that they want you to be involved in that. I think that's awesome. How's everybody doing? Good? Yeah, okay. So this next bit is about rumbling with discomfort. And this is something, maybe this is the core of all of this to create change, right? Is our inner worlds can be so loud that to go into a space that feels even louder can feel overwhelming. But in order to create a different choice and a different outcome, we need to learn to practice rumbling with discomfort and know that you're going to be okay. Like, I've been in some really hairy situations, emotionally, mentally, physically, and I'm okay. And in fact, I'm actually way better than okay. But it didn't annihilate me. Yes, I probably cried a lot and I was wounded, or, you know, this is before I had any of these skills. And now I rumble with the discomfort, and then things like this conversation with my friend come about, and a whole different life experience shows up, completely and utterly different, because I rumbled with discomfort. It's a game changer to be okay with feeling uncomfortable. Isn't it? I'd rather avoid it. I know you probably rather avoid it, but some of the best things that have ever happened to me are on the other side of rumbling with feeling uncomfortable and knowing that I'm going to be okay. And I repeat to myself, I am safe, because it's true. I am safe. I am emotionally safe. No matter what the outcome happens here, I am emotionally safe. A healthy relationship involves both parties listening and receiving each other. And part of what we're here to do is to prototype a new type of relationship. One that is free from patterns, one that is free from distorted relationships, because we want intimacy, right? We want harmony, we want intimacy, we want connection, we want the laughter that comes from our belly because our hearts are connected and we feel expanded and it feels all giddy and silly. But we have to rumble with discomfort to get to that. So my question to you is, how can I listen to my own judgment in this moment? Please share in the comments if you have any ideas. If you're not sure, but not sure, not sure. So the insides of us, the inner intelligence inside of us that resides inside all of us, is always trying to communicate, always. And if you follow human design, you'll know that it shows up in different ways for different people. What we want to learn is how it shows up for you, how you interpret your intuition, how you learn to listen to yourself, and how you can put that into practice every day. And when you haven't ever done it before, it's very subtle. It starts off with a question. What is it that I am interpreting or feeling? And in a very basic way, for many of us, it will feel like a yes will feel like an opening, and a no will feel like a constriction. Very simply, either an opening or a constriction. And at first it might feel like a tiny little open, tiny, tiny, tiny. And at first a no might be a woo, woo, no, woo, little mouse-like noise. But if you can start with, do I want this cup of tea? Yes or no? Check in with yourself. Yes or no? Do I want a cup of tea? Do I want dinner now? Where would I like to go today? Do I want to go to the forest, or do I want to go into town? Yes or no? Do I want to wear this black jumper or the blue jumper? Yes or no? Do I want to wear earrings, or do I want to wear a necklace, or do I want to wear both? Just listen, start to ask yourself questions, and then it's a leap of faith, okay, to start to honor the message that comes up. And it takes repetition and practice to honor the message that comes up. But it is honestly the key to being able to break this pattern, or at least starting to rumble with the discomfort, to advocate and trust yourself. Does that feel doable? You want to give it a go? See how you get on? I was about to say that resonates so much, and yes, yes, yes. Do I want to go for tea? And you know what? You're allowed to change your mind too. Imagine you're allowed to change your mind. Good grief. In human design, a splenic authority, which is somebody who makes their decisions through this channel. If you want to find out more, then you can put, there's Grow, who's on this call, who can point you in the right direction if you want to put your details in Grow. I will get my messages in pings. They happen really fast. I'll either get a yes, or I'll get a no, or I get a not yet. And my no's are often not a hard no's. They are normally a not yet. So you can learn to practice the discernment between, I'm allowed to make a different decision later on. So my son will often say to me, Mummy, can I have a sweetie? I'll say, not yet. Mummy, can I do this? I mean, I don't say not yet all the time. I obviously do say yes sometimes. But I don't want him, I want to give myself the space to be able to say, well, in this right now moment, my intuition, my guidance says not yet. And so I'm going to give myself the time and the space to be able to make my change my mind at a later date. And that's a thing that you can do. Oh, Gro, do you want to just put your human design, if you do human design readings, don't you? If you just want to put, if you do that, you can put your details in the chat, and just in case anybody wants to do that. Oh, not in English. Okay, well, the thought was there. What's really interesting about this is that we have such an identity about who we are. And the identity is, I am a people pleaser. And I hear it in my son, who's 9. He's been told by his school, oh, you're a people pleaser, over and over again. And I say to him, you're not a people pleaser. You love making people happy, but there's no part of you that's a people pleaser. Let's not do that. Because what that does, the more something's repeated, the more you take it on as an identity. So I'm going to challenge you to no longer think of yourself as a people pleaser. And what I wrote down, this is how I reframe the old I am a people pleaser. I now write, I say to myself, I love kindness and harmony, but also with myself too. Isn't that lovely? Like, that gives you permission to do all sorts of things and be lovely and kind, but also with boundaries and with listening to yourself. Like, it has to be a reciprocal experience. Otherwise, you go full on into martyr syndrome, and then nobody wins. So there's an element of this which involves changing an identity, changing who you think you are. And I would really encourage you to stop calling yourself a people pleaser, because by its very nature, it's making you feel like a victim of a situation that you cannot change. And you are not a victim to a situation that you cannot change. You're not. Right. Before we go on to reinforcement, two things. First, expect resistance from your neural pathways at this new identity. Expect it. Know you will have freak out sometimes, and doubt and worry and stuff that comes up that is normal. Healing, learning new behaviors, whatever you want to call it, that path is not linear. I would love it to be from point A to point B, but it doesn't work like that, as I'm sure you know from your experiences so far. And it's a layered experience, right? We are learning, okay, I've got this now. And you think, yeah, I know this new behavior. I've got it. I've set it. And then something else comes along. And you're like, I thought I'd learned that. And yet it's just a different way, a different method, a different angle of relating yourself to this experience. And you're like, okay, that was uncomfortable, but now I'm even more of a master, a Jedi master. And people pleasers also have what I call the perfectionist virus. They believe that in order to be loved, they have to be perfect. And perfect means if I do and say and think the exact things that you need me to be, say, and do, then you will love me. So when it comes to our own healing, we expect it to be perfect. But I want you to rumble with messy. Rumble with this idea that, you know what? Emotions are messy. And it really would be lovely if we stopped apologizing for our messiness. How many times today have you said, oh, sorry, sorry, whoops, sorry? It might be an English, British thing, right? But my betting is that there's still an element of apologizing for ourselves, for breathing, living, being, that happens on some level. Or over apologizing for something. Okay. Any questions about any of that before we move on to the next stage? If no, can you just put a little no in the comment? Otherwise, I'm waiting for you to say something. Okay, the question is, what do you suggest we call ourselves if not people pleasers? I think you missed it just a little bit just now where I talked about that bit. But you don't have to call yourself anything. I am just a kind person with healthy boundaries. I am an empath with healthy boundaries. I am me with healthy boundaries. There's a theme here. Anything that makes us feel less than, any label that makes us feel less than empowered in any way, I think needs addressing, especially when we're relating it to ourselves. So what I said before was my old version would have been, I am a people pleaser. What I say now is, I love kindness and harmony, but also with myself too. So I'm a kind person, but you can feel that if I say I'm a people pleaser, or if I say I am a kind person, but I also am kind to myself, can you feel the difference that that says? I really want to ask you to stop shrinking. I'm practicing this too. Like, I haven't nailed this. It's so ingrained in me that there's a lot of layers, but any place that we shrink ourselves to make ourselves feel unseen, or to avoid conflict or create disharmony, anything to stop having attention put on us in any way that constricts us, that's what I think I'd like to reverse. Because the heart doesn't constrict. I mean, in its truthfulness, the heart is an expansive feeling. The heart is something that radiates love and joy and connection and intimacy. And that's what I want to create more of, in a very practical way, in a very loving way, in a very aware way, with intention, you know? So let's go on to part 3, which is reinforcement. I would say that the key to any long-term change within ourselves or release of a pattern is the reinforcement. And one of the most important things is, who are you surrounding yourself with? Because the people pleaser pattern attracts dominant, selfish, very loud personalities who have little regard, because it suits our patterning, for anybody else apart from themselves. Having a relationship with what I would class as a narcissist, you cannot, it's like putting weed killer on a very small plant that's trying to grow. It's not going to have the best conditions to flourish, because the aim of a narcissist is to keep the status quo, and that they are in control and you are malleable and moldable, right? So I want you to be aware who you're surrounding yourself with, and whether these people are your advocates. Are these people supporting your growth? Are they on your side? Are they safe, emotionally safe people to be around? And then what happens when you have those kind of relationships is you get to practice these behaviors, like I did today with my friend and her coat. I got to practice this behavior, the new one that I wanted to create, with a safe person. And so another layer of the people-pleasing mechanism was allowed to be released and let go. If I was to talk to my ex-husband about it, there would just be reinforcement of that same mechanism over and over and over again. We would just be looping and looping. Do you see what I mean? So who are your safe people? The dog counts, by the way. My cat counts. Reinforcement is about creating a toolkit, and people are part of the toolkit. And we create it slowly. Our nervous system, especially for those of us who had this behavior from childhood, we are perpetually in a state of fight or flight or freeze. Our nervous system is activated a lot. You know, when you hold your breath, or when you want to withdraw, you feel like you want to run away, or you're in a constant state of activation. So we want to create change with kindness and slowly. I think, Rebecca, are you an oily person, essential oils person? Yeah. So all of us on the call this evening, and for those of you who are watching after the fact, if you have a preference of essential oils, then you're going to enjoy this bit. One of the most supportive oils during this time is, do you want to guess what it is? Do you want to put it in the comments? What oil do you think is the most supportive, or one of the most supportive? Because obviously there's not just one. Bergamot, maybe. Jasmine, yep. Frankincense, yep. All good calls, all of them, but it's rosemary. Rosemary is a clarifying expander. Rosemary is heart-based. Rosemary likes to see, like clary sage, rosemary likes to see truth, but not like clary sage does it from your third eye. From this aspect, rosemary does it from the heart, and it allows you to breathe because of the menthol aspect to it. But just energetically, it's a protector and it's an expander. So putting rosemary on CV17, which is the center of your chest, on your heart chakra, and holding it there as a daily practice of allowing the pattern, this distortion to come in, which holds the heart in a sort of cage, right? What we're doing with rosemary is uncaging the heart and allowing it very gently and slowly, with so much medicine and wisdom, to find its natural opening, its natural breath, its natural way of relating. Give it a go and see what you think. Yeah, rosemary, absolutely gorgeous. So rosemary is in my toolkit for this. And then other things that I use are breathing practices. Have you heard of David Goggins? He's a Navy SEAL. He's a character. He's absolutely brilliant. But he talks about a breathing technique to regulate or deregulate, calm the nervous system, which goes like this, where you breathe in twice and then exhale. Breathe in twice and then exhale. And then you can do that as many times as you need. But what it does is it allows the nervous system to calm. So that might be part of when you're rumbling with your big girl pants and you're wanting to rumble with the discomfort. That might be something you want to add into your toolkit. That rosemary was the first oil you fell in love with. Yeah, beautiful. I love it. Hypnosis, like guided meditations, hypnosis meditations, I find really powerful, because what happens with thoughts is that they start to stack. The moment you wake up, you have one thought, and then you have a corresponding thought, and then another thought, and then another thought, and then by breakfast time you have brought your entire history of thoughts one on top of the other, and then you're having an emotional response, and then by lunchtime you're absolutely overwhelmed and it's all too much. So what I like to think about is creating a circuit breaker with the thought stacking before it's gone too intense. And I like to do that by listening to stuff, listening to things like I like listening to Abraham Hicks recordings, or Michael Seeley. Hypnosis is really powerful. I listen to him on repeat, especially about confidence and self-esteem and things like that. On his website, I think they're like $3.99 or something. They're not a lot, but they're absolutely worth it. Michael Seeley, Michael, just the normal way. I think Seeley is S-E-A-L-E-Y. Oh, it is, Deb? Okay, awesome. And then I repeat to myself, I am safe, I am okay. You may find that there are other affirmations or words that speak to you, but keep it simple. Because when you're feeling dysregulated and really on edge, if you go, I am an abundant creator and I want to change all of that, blah, 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 your nervous system is going, what now? What are you talking about? So just keep it simple. I am safe, I am okay. Just keep repeating it. You can put your hands on a table, touch something that feels solid, connect with something that feels stable, and repeat to yourself, I am safe, I am okay. Okay. Have you got any questions? Is this landing? Does it feel resonant? Are you feeling inspired and ready for action? Or you're like, holy moly, I'm not sure what to do? Or how's it going? What's really awesome, also great, is asking a room of sensitive folk how they feel in the moment. Because they're like, oh, I don't know how I feel. I need at least 2 days to figure that one out. I need to process my experience, which is completely fine too, obviously. But if you've got any questions, now is the time to ask. Anything that's coming up for you and I haven't covered just yet. I think somebody's writing something. I'm just going to give it a second. Okay, back when you said that you tell yourself you are emotionally safe no matter what, how do you know that in your being? Well, I don't always know that in my being, but No, I don't always know that. Like I'm having a physical experience to a thought or past feeling that feels like it's in the present moment. But what I do is, like I was just explaining, I touch the table and I put my fingers on the table, or I'll put my feet on the floor, and I'll connect with the present moment of what's happening. And I'll look around and I'll go, okay, I'm going to take a sense check. I am okay in this moment. I am okay. I am safe. So if I am okay and I'm safe in this moment, then what I'm experiencing is an agitated previous experience, like a trigger. And so I can deal with that in a different way, like oh, you poor sweetheart. I can allow myself to let the trigger run through my system, because I know that even though I'm resisting having the emotional experience, always, nearly, that if I allow it to happen, it passes through much more quickly. And as long as I know that I recognize that in this place and space I am safe, then I feel okay. Like I know I can handle this. Sometimes I need to call a friend. So sometimes you may, if you're working with a therapist or something, especially if you're working with PTSD or some sort of trauma response, you know, somatic therapy is really powerful. My preference isn't like CBT, talk therapy, although that can be helpful because it keeps you stuck in your brain. And what we want to do is have a physical nervous system relaxing. Yes, I'm getting my parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. And that might be ever so subtle. Because if you imagine that there's a traffic light system, for people who, let's, for argument's sake, just call us people pleasers for this example. People pleasers generally spend their life with their nervous system somewhere between yellow and red. So we don't really grow up knowing what green feels like. We don't know what calm feels like. So what we're learning is the shade of amber. What does a lower end of amber feel like? Okay, and then when I get used to that, then I can get used to, okay, what's the highest shade of green feel like? But to imagine that your nervous system will know how to access a green when you've been in a heightened state of amber for an exceedingly long time, it's too much to ask. So we just allow whatever it is to be as it is, and find gentle ways to get the parasympathetic nervous systems to work. So like I'm going to flip this right back to what we said right at the beginning, which is the whole aim of this is to create a healthy relationship to ourselves. So when it comes to your nervous system, what you want to be asking yourself is, what feels good? Okay, this oil feels good. Have a toolkit. Maybe you want to even laminate. I'm a laminating fan. You may want to laminate your toolkit, a list of it, you know. Okay, well, because remembering all of this stuff in the moment is really tricky. We forget. So it might be that you want to do breathing. It might be that you want to go for a walk in the forest. It might be that you want to call a friend. It might be that you want to use oils on points. It might be that you just need a nap, you know. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any other questions? I truly believe that kindness is a superpower. And I believe that with awareness and healthy choices, that kindness can be one of the most transformative and incredible energies we put out into the world. But it has to be inward and outward. And I want us to start really valuing our kindness as a superpower and not as a mistake or something wrong, or I'm not made in this world. You know, if you want to get evangelical about it, I believe kindness is the answer to a lot of the stuff that happens right now. The distorted ways of this world, the way that society interacts with each other, our relationships, kindness is key, and we have that superpower. But we're learning how to master our superpower like a Jedi master in training, rather than it work against us. So next steps. Re-listen to this as many times as you need to. It's going to be in the Teachable course portal, so you will have access to it for as long as you want. Listen to it over and over again. Take your time with this. There's no rush. Surround yourself with people who get this, who get it. And why not? Why not surround yourself with people who get it? Keep practicing. Keep rumbling. Keep going into those uncomfortable places and advocate for yourself. Trust yourself. Stand up for yourself. Ask for what you want. And if you don't know what you want, start with asking yourself, what do I want? Create space to listen to that answer. Create space. Give yourself permission to have space to listen to that answer. I do one-to-one coaching. So if this is something that you really would like some help and support with, or any other pattern that you're wishing to create a different relationship with, then you can reach out to me, and I do one-to-one coaching. There's all sorts of courses on Teachable to do with this, and inner critic and inner child's work and all sorts of stuff. And I've got a course that's coming up in April to do with creating heartful relationships. It's a 5-week course over, each one's a fortnight, about creating conscious, healthy relationships with each other. And it's going to be amazing. I've got a podcast, if you don't know, the New Dawn podcast. You can check that out. I interview some really amazing women and men, and we talk about all things growth and expansion and all things to do with our own personal journeys. And then lastly, the recording will be up tomorrow in the course portal, so you'll have access to that for as long as you want. And apart from that, I just want to say a big, deep thank you to each of you showing up, looking at your patterns, being curious, creating awareness, and ultimately being the change makers and the spreaders of kindness and love. I mean, that's awesome. So thank you. So that's it for this masterclass. I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you have, I would love to get some feedback. You're more than welcome to send me a little note with what you thought. If you have any other questions, please do let me know. And in the meantime, I'm sending you lots of love. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.